Joining us this week on the Oblivion Bar Podcast is the writing duo behind the Dark Horse Canadian cult romance series, Tear Us Apart. Separately, one is the writer of comic titles like Two Dead with artist Nate Powell, CRYPTOCRACY with Pete Woods, Arca with Jesse Lonergan, and actually was nominated as the first comic book ambassador by the U.S. State Department in 2016. The other is a successful comedian, screenwriter, and director. You may know him from 2008's Tropic Thunder, 2010's She's Out of My League, 2013's This Is the End, and this year's BlackBerry. Also, some will know him as Hiccup Haddock from the How to Train Your Dragon franchise. It is my honor to welcome both Van Jensen and Jay Baruchel onto the Oblivion Bar Podcast.
Hi there. Thanks for having us.
Heck yeah. Thank you guys for being here. I appreciate it. And I think just going right into this conversation, like I mentioned there in the intro, let's just start talking about Tear Us Apart, which is your upcoming Dark Horse series with artist Alessandro Michelli and letterer Taylor Esposito, which is hitting shelves on September 6th. Now, I'm going to do kind of like the boilerplate synopsis here, and then we can talk about it a little bit more in depth. So, deep in the Canadian wilderness, a vicious cult dedicated to an ideology of pain trains children to become deadly assassins. In the midst of this world of cruelty, two teenagers break the cardinal rule by falling in love. The only thing standing between them is happily ever after and an army of murderers with a taste for blood. So, Jay, I want to start off with you. When you and Van decided to team up to develop this series, what was your initial pitch or hook to Dark Horse for Tear Us Apart?
Oh, geez. I remember the first thing that kind of Van and I chatted about was because he and I have a pretty good shorthand because we've been jamming together on a bunch of different shit for it's got to be getting up there now. Is it got to be like closer to seven plus years or something. Wow. And in a different life when I was part owner of a comic book company called Chapter House, and so Van and I we started kind of jamming and stuff during that era, and then we, worked on some TV scripts and stuff together, and anyway, so we would just use each other as kind of sounding boards a lot of the time for stuff that had nothing to do with no expectation of it being a thing for him and I to do together. Like he would just pitch me ideas he had and vice versa. And I think in like one of those chats, like Van said something like, "Hey man, we should just do something together. Like we talk a bunch. We have a lot of kind of cool ideas, and I think we could probably get something going. And so would you want to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And so I just I threw out this I had the title before anything because I love Joy Division, and Love Will Tear Us Apart is obviously their big thing. But I also love In Excess, and there was Will Never Tear Us Apart. And I saw that I was like, those are kind of those are sort of diametrically opposed philosophical concepts, both about like sort of love and being part of a couple, and how it can kill you, but you're also never going to drive them apart. And I just thought there was something kind of there, and I had had this germ in my head from the story of Henry Lee Lucas, famously dramatized in Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, which is a brutal, real-life serial killer. And Henry Lee Lucas always maintained that he was raised in a cult in the Florida Everglades called the Hand of Death, and that they were trained in sort of killing and assassination and shit from a very early age, and the implication was that sort of people from the government would sort of check in on them, and so the idea was he was trying to say that it was like a Jonestown where they didn't all kill themselves. In fact, quite the opposite, that they were being trained to do dirty work. And so I was like, well, that's a kind of a neat place to start a thing, but who gives a shit? Who are the people in there that we would care about? And I think I think I came to Van with just the kind of arena, and we started sort of talking about how we got into a very, very early on, we talked about Alice in Chains for some reason, and we just kind of started going off about this it'd be cool to have a battle royale ultra simple in like a good weighted, profound, allegorical way, but like ultra simple boy meets girl in jeopardy kind of narrative with a sort of hint of fairy tale to it, but on this bed of the ravings of a fucking serial killer. And so we just like somewhere in that van, right? Like we kind of started jamming on it and it became what it was.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I remember that we like fairly early on, it kind of clicked in. Like Jay and I, like for whatever reason, we're both really interested in the same esoteric stuff, and so we'll just have these. He's like, oh, you know that thing about the serial killers and the connection with the CIA. It's like, oh yeah, like I know that one. So, but then as we were talking about it, it just clicked into this like, what if the movie True Romance was about kids escaping from a murder cult? And that, and like, okay. and once it was like, okay, like at the most simple level, like there's just this really clean core idea. And it's that idea that like, and I would, it's like the emotional stuff that I think really hooks people is like, these kids just want to have a life together. Like they've discovered love in the most unlikely way. And they're just like, this is great. Like, I would like to learn more about this. And it's very naive, teenage love. But then, and they're like, yeah, like we could just like go off together and like, and not have to kill anyone or fight ever again. And so that's the vision. But to do that is like, well, we have to kill all these people that are coming to kill us. So it's, it's this like, in order to get the thing that they really want, they have to do the thing that they really don't. That they want to escape from, which, yeah, it clicked pretty quick. And, I think Dark Horse was down with it. They saw something they liked.
Yeah. So I don't think I've seen this online anywhere. How long is this series supposed to go? Is this a mini series for you guys?
The first arc is 4 issues, and then fingers crossed. That's kind of the way that comics works now. Is almost every publisher is it's like you're going to get 4 or 5 issues, and then it's like you see what the market does. So it sounds like that.
But yeah, but I like that he didn't even say hopefully. He just said the first arc is 4 issues. So yeah, that's kind of right now it's at 4, but we have loads of story left to tell. So yeah. Hopefully if people dig it, we get to keep going.
Van, I love what you said there in terms of like sometimes, especially as young people, but I would even argue as adults, even all we want to do is just sometimes we want to find our person, right? And it's always these obstacles that jump in front that maybe has nothing to do with that relationship, but will still halt that relationship, whether it be timing or your personal, with things going on in your personal life, things like that. And obviously in this story, in Tear Us Apart, these 2 young people, which are, again, we're not going to spoil a ton here because this book is still well over a month away from coming out. But I will say that these kids don't have names. They have numbers. 25 and 82 are the 2, correct? That are kind of our central protagonists in the story. You can tell, especially in one scene in that first issue where they want to embrace each other, but they just inherently don't. And it's up to a decision by 25 later in that first issue that kind of halts things and puts things into real perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, we just, we wanted it to be a romance. Like what we crafted was a romance story that happens to have a massive amount of bloodshed.
Yeah, it's basically it's star-crossed lovers. It's the same shit. Star-crossed lovers in intense jeopardy. It's pretty fertile stuff, and yeah, it, like Van said, at its heart, it is a kind of like a big beating heart of a love story, and there's like that. I mean, there's literally that iconography over all of it. It just happens to be intensely gory and about a murder cult. It's sort of like, imagine if like at the end of Battle Royale, those 2 that escaped, found out that fucking all the kids on the island aren't dead and they're coming after them.
Yeah. Oh, and also, you guys were mentioning this earlier. I think it might have been you, Jay, who said this, but your guys' jam sesh that you have where you just pitch each other shit back and forth, I'm super jealous. I don't even have to participate. I would love to just be present for that and just see you guys go back and forth with your crazy ideas for movies or comics or whatever.
We get a kick out of it.
Yeah, you'd either be really impressed or really like, oh, I expected more.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought it would sound any different than just two dudes talking. Let me just say, like, COVID really kicked that shit into overdrive. I think this is a COVID concept, actually.
Yeah, it is. I think we were just like, who knows what the hell is going on with the world? Let's make a fun comic or two.
Yeah, exactly.
The Oblivion Bar was actually born out of COVID as well. I think a lot of creatives were sitting on their hands going, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And of course, there was a lot of bad that happened at COVID, but I would say on a different spectrum, some people were able to create things when they often wouldn't be able to or wouldn't have the time to.
Oh, absolutely. Well, necessity is the mother of invention, always.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I want to go back quickly about, Tear Us Apart and in terms of like the idea of love. And Van, I want to ask you this specifically. Would you say one of the main themes of the story is that love is always worth that risk, no matter what that risk is?
Yeah. And I think certainly from, this is a book about teenagers. And so I think, especially when you're a teenager, and not that it ever completely goes away, but there's just something so specific about being a teenager and like, just the risk of like putting yourself out there to someone. The kind of cultural fears that come with like there's all this baggage tied to having a significant other or not, but then also like your emotions are so fueled by hormones, and so you just like you literally don't have control over yourself, and everything like that feels so elevated. It feels like the world is at stake with what happens if I ask this girl out or if, asking a boy out or whatever. And so we really, for Jay and I think, it was early on we decided to set this book in the 1990s, which you don't even necessarily realize at first when you start reading it. But I think part of that was for us to like write it and be able to put ourselves in that space and in that headspace of like, man, like, it's almost terrifying to go back and remember how that felt.
Yeah, that I think that's spot on. Everything is heightened in life or death. The stakes feel so bloody high when you're a teenager, and we're talking about a period of like around a half decade. I one that now goes by like a fucking fart in a tornado. You don't even notice a half decade, right? But that half decade, when you're a kid, is everything. It's climbing Everest and then some, and getting back down and doing it all over again. And yeah, I think that's kind of why rock and roll is directly connected to youth, and why and you'll never give a shit about stuff as much as you do when you're a kid. It's just everything's for better or worse. There's just like you just all of your veins are closer to the surface, all of your nerve endings are closer to the surface, and time moves at a different pace, and everything feels kind of like, I hate cliches like life or death, but there's this weird kind of contradiction of you feel invincible, yet everything feels like this is it. This is all there is. So there's like a weird combination of invincibility and of the infinite and the finite, and I sound like a real dick talking like that, but I think that's kind of what we're like sort of touching on in this book, because like these two kids, have some pretty sick skills and are definitely like peak human, and so there is an element of invincibility, yet being sort of just as like prone to everything else, right? Like, and when and to the extent that you gave a shit, sometimes you fucking fail an exam and you're like, oh shit, that's it. That's me done. I'm going to death row. I'm going to, this is it. This is how it starts. This is the long, windy path to my ultimate demise and being electrocuted, and it's all with this exam. This is how it starts. Like, it just is like, anyway, this is nothing if not fertile and fun and beautiful and colorful, and why it's like more fun to go to the movies when you're a kid than you are as a 40-year-old, when you hate that everybody's coughing and texting and shit like that. And like, I'm sure if I went as a 16-year-old now, I wouldn't even fucking notice that shit, and it would just be a blast, right? And I would go to a concert and I'd be right in the middle of the fucking pit and all this shit. Meanwhile, now at 41, the prospect of being anywhere near a fucking mosh pit, I'd sooner hang myself, right? Like, and so I just like, yeah, we made a very early decision to make this thing a bunch of things, and one of them is a kind of a love letter to a time and place, but also to an era that we all go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you guys just said in terms of like, as a kid, everything does feel so right now. Like you said, as a young person, you are invincible. There's nothing that can hurt you. But also, if a girl turns you down to the homecoming, that's the end of the world, and everyone will know. And imagine what I always think about now, because I'm a kid of the '90s as well. I try to think about and put in perspective how kids nowadays have the internet just right here in their pocket at all times. Back in the day, if something terrible happened, you would hear about it maybe throughout the next day or throughout the week. And, or you could just let things kind of slide underneath the ether of time. Nowadays, boy, oh boy, it's Snapchat. And I'm sounding like an old fart here right now.
Back in the day, no, you might have got a prank call or two, but then your parents would answer the next one, and then the kids would typically fuck off after that, right? Like, and so, yeah, it follows you home in a way, right? Like I tend to think shit's always the same. That like for every change of an era, for 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Everything that I'm better at than my parents were, they were better at other shit too, than I. And the same with the kids ahead of me. There's kids ahead of me now. They're way better at stuff than I am, but they're fucking terrible at other shit that we were better at, right? So I tend to think it's all the same shit always, except for these kids have nowhere to hide kind of now. And my bedroom was my fucking refuge, man. Like, it sucks being a teenager a lot of the time. And so at least I knew that if I could make it home, if I could take the fucking, the 2 buses and a metro back to my house, I could watch my fucking music videos. I could read my comics. I could watch my movies. I could, whatever the fuck it was, I had my little, if I could just make it home, I'd be okay. Right. And now this shit follows them into their fortress of solitude, which is like, now if they allow it to, but like the internet is not a tool for these kids. The internet is part of their anatomy. So how can they separate from it? So it just feels a bit sort of unfair.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great kind of parallel to both 25 and 82 in this story. They are trapped in this situation that they are in at the beginning of this story. And the only way that they seem to think that they can get out of it is what, again, well, no spoilers, of course, but you learn a lot in that first issue. And I don't really have, I don't have a direct question, but I want to know, what was your guys' process in terms of working with Alessandro Micheli with this story? I mean, the art is incredible. I think we can all agree with that. But
I would even go so far as to say the art is the fucking best thing. Like, I think I would say, like, it looks really good. I think I think the writing is obviously good. I'm biased, but I'll just say this, that like, with a lesser artist, I don't know that anybody gives a shit about this book.
Sure.
That's the secret of comics though, too. Like, I mean, when you get into writing comics, your career is built on the artists that you get to work with. And, this one, as we were chatting about it, and we got started chatting with Dark Horse. We're like, okay, like we need to find an artist. And I think Alessandro might have been the only person that I suggested to Jay.
That was your one.
Yeah, I was just like, here's this guy. And you were like, oh shit. Yeah. Like can we get him? And then Ale was super stoked to do the book. And, and he would, as it would go along, he would ask these questions of like, oh, like I had this colorist, but he dropped off. Like, can I color it myself and do this different approach? Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Because I think he is a very underappreciated artist in comics, and I hope that this book gives him the recognition that he deserves. And he's also just like, so he flew over for Heroes Con in Charlotte, and I went, and so we, it was like we got a hotel, shared a hotel room and like shared tables at the con, and he's just like the most like quintessentially Italian guy. Like his family literally runs a pizza shop, and like it's like they keep the entire town fed. And he's just like the most delightful guy, hysterical, is like, immediately like, okay, I have another brother. And so yeah, I so hope that people read this book and are like, oh, I really need to pay attention to this guy. Like he's doing something special.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's usually, in my experience, typically there's either the guy with a really wild POV, but maybe that doesn't sustain itself and scratch the itches you need from like traditional kind of superhero approach to shit, right? Or you have someone who's really great at drawing superhero shit, but they don't necessarily have the strongest voice or most interesting POV on that. So with Ali, you have this incredibly rare combination of a guy that has like that can only be drawn by him, right? That's a very weird, wild, specific POV he has that actually still does the thing, scratches every fucking action itch you need from it, right? Like it's a really awesome fucking thing when you can do the slick superhero shit in a way that nobody else has seen. Then you're elevated into another strata.
I'll give you a process thing real quick. So, and I don't even know that I've said this to Jay before, but one process thing. So Jay and I, like we break the story together. We break a script. It's usually just halves. Like each of us write a half, and then we meld it together.
Swap.
Yeah, we like kind of write over each other's stuff. Pass notes back and forth, combine the things, send to Ollie. So Jay's writing, like most people wouldn't know Jay's just his prose. His prose is phenomenal and is also like wild. It's like super descriptive and super fun and super energetic, and it's just like it's so fun to read. But like Ollie's first language is not English, and like and so on every script I do a like pre-translation for like, I don't speak Italian, but I'm like going through it as like, oh, he's gonna have no idea what the hell that means. Like, let me just like turn this into plain English, like a little bit, just so that it's not like what he just drew a yacht sitting in the middle of like, why is there a yacht? I was like, I don't know. Well, you said something about going full boat. Like, I don't,
Oh, I love that. That's funny. Well,
that's very nice of you to say. Thank you.
I agree with you guys 100%. This should be the tipping point in terms of Michel, like getting people out there, getting his work out there, and letting people see what an all-star he is, because he is incredible in this. That was like one of the first things I noticed. I knew I was going to like the story because it's you guys, but as soon as I started seeing the art, especially the scenes where it was 25 and I'm sorry, this is a slight spoiler, I guess, but 25 and another child go at it.
Yeah, act piece of shit.
Yeah. Well, that action scene together, I was like, man, this is legit.
Isn't that shit awesome, man?
Yeah.
Anyway, I can't say enough good things about it. There's no way you walk past that
right
on the shelf and ignore it. Like you like what else looks like that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to stray away from Tear Us Apart, but I think we're going to start diving into, I know me personally, I'm going to try to start asking questions about the series, so I don't want to get too spoiler. I want to talk a little bit about both you guys kind of individually here. So sure. Van, I'd love to start with you first. You were speaking on how much a great artist can elevate a story to new heights. And you recently just put out Arca through IDW with one of my favorite current working artists, Eisner-nominated artist Jesse Lonergan, who I am, of course, a proud patron of and fan of. Like, he's the best. I would love for people at home who aren't, I'd just talk to the people really quick. Tell them about Arca and tell them why they should go pick it up right now at their local comic book shop.
Yeah, so Arca is a done-in-one graphic novel that imagines like the richest, most powerful people in the world had this plan for like, you know, like at some point the earth is going to end, there's going to be calamity, and, you know, we need to have something to do. So they craft this vessel called the Arca. And as you start the story, it's like, okay, we're headed towards the nearest habitable planet, and, you know, the money doesn't exist, right? So how do you get people to work for you if there's no money? So they have these teenagers and children that are essentially slaves for them, but working for them with the promise that, like, once you turn 18, you become a citizen like us, and then when we get to this planet, we're all equals. And so it's the story of this girl who is one of the servants and is a true believer, like very black and white. And then early on, she discovers something that it's just like it doesn't fit. And so then she starts to, it's like pull at the thread of it, and gradually the whole thing comes undone. So yeah, and you know, it's like tear us apart. Like with Arca, the art by Jesse Lonergan, I mean, it's worth it just for that alone. He's the most design centric artist working, and just, you know, I would write like a 5-panel page and he would turn it into 20 panels, but somehow make it better, you know, and every other artist is like, takes a 5-panel page and is like, I need to turn this into a splash page of this guy punching someone so that I can sell the original art. And Jesse is like doing crazy experimental stuff. And I have to brag on Jesse too. He just sent over, I put together this anthology of Stardust, the Super Wizard, which is this weird old Golden Age character. Jay is going to do Jay, you owe me a short story for that. I need to hit you up about that. But Jesse turned his story in, and I was literally laughing out loud reading it, and just like dying laughing. It's so weird. And the big premise is around a machine that turns people's heads into dog heads. And they're like, like robotic sharks, and cool. Just like so many incredible gags. And I was like, I can't even edit this. Like, I'm literally just, you know, reading it, laughing. And I immediately grabbed my kids and I was like, you guys have to read. This is the best comic I've ever read. And had them read it. And they're like rolling around laughing. They're enjoying it so much. So yeah, Jesse is just truly, truly special.
Yeah. No, he's absolutely just one of the best. And I'm always so surprised. I don't like to sound gatekeepy or anything with the medium, because I feel like the moment you start doing stuff like that, people get turned off to it. And comics are already kind of a somewhat like, some people find it taboo to just try to place to get into it. So if you don't like hold their hand in the beginning, you're doing them a disservice. But I always try to find a way to highlight Jesse and his work. Like I said, I'm a patron of his, and he is just one of the coolest, both online, and I haven't had a chance to meet him yet, but I've talked to people who have, and I've heard that he's the best.
Yeah, I mean, I always love when there's someone who is a verifiable genius, and then you meet them, it's like, oh, you're a normal human being. This is like, this is delightful. Like, I expected, I don't know, an ascot or something, but
not one what do you call that with one eye glass?
Monocle.
A monocle, thank you. Yeah, not one monocle, but what's going on here?
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, no,
it'd be cool if a guy had 2 monocles
without the brim or anything.
Yeah, just holding both.
Well, Jay, I feel like I would be so incredibly upset with myself if I didn't talk to you at least a little bit about BlackBerry, because this to me is one of the best movies of the year thus far. I mean, we're only at the halfway point, but it is so great.
Thank you. I agree with you with that.
And so for people who aren't aware of BlackBerry, if you're not familiar with this movie for some reason, it is a black comedy about the inception of the BlackBerry phone. And obviously you co-star with It's Always Sunny star Glenn Howerton and director Matt Johnson. So my question for you is, well, actually, let me go back a little bit. I'm going to butter you up just a little bit more. You were incredible in the role as the timid but brilliant Matt. Am I saying it right?
Mike Lazaridis.
Mike Lazaridis. Thank you. Yes. My question for you though is, in terms of your process, kind of getting into character, getting into the mind of Mike, if I can say that, how much of that included just trying to emulate the real life person compared to your own deal?
Well, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for a very reasonable question that I abhor answering because because that is a very natural question. That's a question I would ask. And why I hate answering it is because like I'm not even kind of doing like an impression. We talked very early on about what I needed to be in the movie. So, so we're all load bearing in different ways and we all have sort of a specific kind of function. And I'm a firm believer that everybody should kind of try to do the thing in front of them as best they can and not lament doing something else and not trying to make it a different thing. Like, imagine if every guitarist played a fucking solo through every verse, right? Like, so you've got a thing you need to do. And so I just tried to figure out very early what it is Matt Johnson needed me to do. And he's like, I am asking you to do it for a reason. And I think that you fighting your impulses will create an interesting energy that is correct for this character and what he has to do in this narrative. And so, as someone that talks with my hands a lot, as someone that like is an absolute whore for a fucking punchline or any semblance of a punchline or any like I the lowest hanging fruit is where I live typically so to fight against all of that, to resist every kind of urge, instinct, crutch, whatever negative or positive version of it you want to describe, but to swallow all of that, to resist all of that, the push and pull between me just doing that and trying to fight everything that I've built up. I've been on set acting since I was 12, right? So I'm 41 now. So that means you develop some fucking habits, right? And so me trying to fight against those habits is the jumping off point for what I do in that movie. I kind of figured out what the sort of visual side of it. I wanted what his sort of what his resting bitch face would be. What his sort of jumping off point on his face is. So that connected to the thing I just mentioned about fighting my impulses, and then just always working with the director to figure out what it is, what my corner of this scene is, and what I need to be doing, how I need to pass the puck to Glenn, and all of that shit. Like just knowing what I had to do and having that filtered through the two things I just described. That's kind of the recipe for whatever it is I did in BlackBerry.
Well, it's funny you say that in terms of like working so closely with Matt Johnson. He obviously is in the film as well as Doug Frieden. Yeah. What was it like working with a director so closely, scene to scene? Did that change anything as well?
So I've done it a few times. It can suck, and it can also be awesome, and it can also be everything in between. MJ wasn't going to be in this one, and I told him he should be, and that he should play Doug, and I wanted to do the movie with him because I'm a big fan of his, which is why I did this movie, and I've been a fan of his for a long time. And to me, it wasn't an MJ movie if he wasn't in it. It wasn't one of his, because that's kind of just what he does and all of his shit. And so I urged him to do it, and I knew that the process would be better for it because I know that that's how he operates. He sort of for lack of a less annoying term, he leads from the front. He's just like, he's in the mix, and so that means that the answers are way quicker. The shorthand gets developed soon, even quicker, and there's a sort of comfort zone of this is our thing. The circle we're in now is sacred, and I trust him, and he's thrown his lot in with me, and I've thrown my lot in with him. We are tethered to one another, and Glenn, the three of us are tethered to each other. So if we all go down, we're all going down together. So let's raise each other up as best we can. So it was only a good thing, because the thing I'll say about Matt, because BlackBerry was not certainly not one of the easier movies I've ever done for a few reasons, but the best thing about it was the cinema itself. Matt is a God-given has a God-given talent. He's meant to do this, and you know, and he drives me up the fucking wall, and he does my head in sometimes, and we would, you know, go way longer than I thought we had to, and all this different shit. But it doesn't matter. It's not my place. That's his lab, and the work was good. It was never because he didn't know what he was looking for. It was quite the opposite, and so it was just this rewarding, sincere process. I'm going off on a tangent, but I was like, if you know the difference between busy work and real work, most sets have a big fucking busy work problem, and this place never did. We never did a thing because we didn't know what to do. That was never the issue, and so I would every day of the week I would like cut off my left arm to get to work with someone like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll tell you, one of my favorite scenes. Well, actually, I'll just say it right here. My favorite scene of the movie is actually the final scene, and minor spoilers
cool.
for the movie if you haven't seen it. But it is the scene where you go and you check on. I think it's the BlackBerry Storm, the prototype, or
the shittiest smartphone in history.
Yeah, and you even see that in the scene. You're trying to like do the click and press, and it's fucking up. And anybody who had a BlackBerry back in the day, especially the touchscreen when the iPhone came out, they know how incredibly terrible those phones were.
Yeah, bad.
And everything about it, but I just love the full circle from the first scene of the movie to the end where you are going in and like fixing the white noise. So good.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank
of
you.
course. And kind of my final question for you guys. Again, I'm so appreciative that you were able to come on here, talk about Tear Us Apart, talk to us about Jesse Lonergan, talking about BlackBerry. My final question is a question that we generally like to ask most of our guests that come on, especially people who are working in comics. And that is essentially, very simply, what are you reading right now? What's something that you feel like you've read semi-recently or right now that you can highlight and tell our listeners that you've been enjoying?
Oh, good Lord.
I can jump in. I just finished the 10,000 Demon Tree, or maybe it's the thousand Demon Tree. I think it's just the 1,000 Demon Tree. By Jeffrey Allen Love, who is a World Fantasy Award cover artist and painter, and he does these just really interesting. I don't know. It's so hard to describe it, but it's a story that's kind of a like proto-Celtic myth. That's wordless. So I met Jeffrey at Heroes Con, and we traded books, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, I love that. That kind of reminds me. What was the A24 movie that came out not too long ago?
Oh, the Green
that
Knight.
kind of dealt in that similar realm. The Green Knight. Thank you. Yes, I don't know why I was spacing that. Green Knight was. I love that kind of like Celtic horror genre, whatever whatever that is.
Folk horror, sort of Arthurian shit. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
For me, I got this gift as a very belated wedding present from my friend. La Bête Morte. It's this. It was this comic published in France during German occupation. It's like an actual. It's a bit of French resistance propaganda that's like actually survived and was published. It's fucking wild.
Wow, that is awesome.
It's a fucking trip. And then I also read. I'm bad with names. I'm really bad with names. It was the manga that's like a bio of Hitler. Do you know? It's Shigeru, I think is the artist's name or the writer's name. But it's this like really wild, incredibly responsible, incredibly vital and really interesting but respectful sort of bio of Hitler, but done by some Japanese people, and it's like so obviously informed by their kind of experiences, and it's a spectacular book. I think it's literally called Hitler. And
is it? I'm going to say this incorrectly, probably, but Shigeru Mizuki.
That's it. That's the one. Shigeru Mizuki.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's the one. Okay. And my father-in-law got it for me, just like on a lark, which is like that's a good relationship. And then it's not a comic book, but I'm also reading Carthage: A History by Serge Lancel. it's not an entertaining book. It assumes you know a lot about Carthage and archaeology to begin with.
Not for your intro reader.
Certainly not.
Yeah.
It would it would put a lot of intro readers to sleep, I think. But I'm fascinated by it, which I think we can all agree is what's most important.
I think what's most important is the secret of how you made your sunglasses disappear.
Yeah.
Of what? Of what?
How you made your sunglasses disappear.
Yeah, and no earphones either. That's
weird.
That's the magic of podcasting, everybody.
Magic.
Yeah, you never know. You never know what you're going to come up with.
Movie magic.
Yeah.
Sorry, I really fucked up this. We had such a nice ending.
No one's ever going to know what we're talking about right now because I'm going to edit this bitch together and it's going to sound pristine.
All right.
But actually, it's funny that we're going through this kind of thing because we're at the tail end of the conversation. And I, again, want to just say thank you guys so much for being here, for giving all the insight on Tear Us Apart. Again, it comes out on September 6th. So you guys go to your local comic book shop, put that on your pull right now. And I want to kind of hand it off to you guys one more time. Jay, I'll start with you. Is there anything else you want to quickly highlight before we end the conversation today?
Be nice to one another now more than ever. It's some shit, but just I don't know.
Go Canadians.
Go Habs, go, and fucking WGA and SAG after, give them hell.
That's right. Van?
Well, I'm going to be selfish in this. I've got a novel called Godfall that's coming out in November. That's my first novel, and I'm excited about that. And then also, Jay has a great TV show called We're All Gonna Die. That's a docu-style show about potential ways that humanity might get wiped out. That hopefully, I think it's not available in the U.S. right now, but hopefully soon.
Yeah.
There's going to be a special guest in season 2, this guy, which I think is my first time on camera. So sorry, everyone. Or as Canadians would say, sorry.
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 No, he lit the world on fire. Yes, the cameras malfunctioned because of how good he was. I host this doc series called We're All Gonna Die. Even Jay Baruchel. It's out in Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand. It's meant to be coming out in the States sometime soon. We were in production on season 2. Van was kind enough to come and be on camera and talk about the connection of we were talking about like weird space shit and comics and how comics are an interesting kind of place to unpack and explore pretty big, profound kind of concepts, that we kind of get to intro and audition ideas that are kind of, hard to process anyway, so just connection between space theory and comic books is essentially what we chatted about, right?
That's awesome. Well, I do hope we get it here in the U.S. here soon. Do you know would it be on a streaming service or would it be?
I have no idea. I shouldn't say I have no idea. I have some idea, but I don't want to get sued or look like an arsehole.
Oh, fair enough.
So I'll just let's just wait.
Uh-huh.
But just know that there are unseen hands scheming behind the scenes, working feverishly to bring this TV show to American audiences.
Perfect. Well, good deal. Thank you guys so much again for being here, and we'll see you soon.